and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Let's begin with some good news today. History being made today in our judiciary system. The top 2 posts in the judiciary are now held by female judges. So we had the first female Chief Justice, Tan Sri Tengku Maimun, back in May. She was appointed. And now we have the elevation of the Federal Court Judge, Justice Datuk Rohana Yusof, as the new Court of Appeal President. She's the first woman to hold this position since the inception of the Court of Appeal back in 1994.
I can see you beaming, Melisa.
I'm so happy.
And I think there are a lot of men out there also who are very happy that the gender agenda is getting some real play during Malaysia Baru, that we're actually seeing some progress being made. Of course, I know it's not perfect, but it's a really important, I guess, Melisa, and I'm looking at some of the kind of chatter on social media. It's important to make these important steps, right? The first are important, not to diminish the fact that they got there on merit. They're not there as tokens. At least that must be the story.
Yeah, well, I think, they're definitely there by merit, and I think it's really important that we highlight these important moves, especially when there is an imbalance to correct. So every step in correcting the imbalance, you kind of need to shout it out from the rooftops to normalize it. And once that imbalance has been corrected, then you can kind of just I guess focus on the work that needs to be done, the merit of each candidate, as opposed to one person's gender or race, or the need to kind of impose or make sure that we're looking at diversity in every angle.
Right. Okay. So I understand, Melisa, the need for diversity in a lot of fields, but I'm not entirely sure when it comes to the judiciary what it means. Right. Partly because I guess when I think of the judiciary and I think of judges, I think about their history of judgments. Right. What exactly have their judgments stood for in terms of their value systems, in terms of the way they think about Malaysia and the ideas of justice? I think that, for me, is always the thing in play, rather than their identity. So I don't think of our judges primarily in terms of their gender identity, their race, their location, whether they come from Sabah, Sarawak, or Malaya, though it must have an effect. I'm not quite entirely sure how it works out. How do you see it?
Well, I think precisely that. I think someone's diversity in background when it comes to the judiciary will have an impact in the way they interpret the law. Because I think spoke to a former federal court judge, Tan Sri Zainun Ali, and she was, looking at her kind of judgments, she was hailed to be someone who had practiced judicial activism in the way she interpreted the law and the Constitution as well. So I think someone's background, gender, race, diversity, what they bring to the judgments, all come into play in making those very important decisions.
Yeah, just a small point before we kind of round up this discussion is the question of minority or dissenting views coming out of the judiciary. It's been, and I've interviewed somebody on this precise question, that they in fact isn't that much in Malaysia, that often that you see a consensus among the judges or they write judgments together, and the lack of minority or dissenting views suggests something about the lack of perhaps evolution of our law, that we're not seeing a competition or a discussion about values, precisely going back to the point about interpretation. So where does that interpretation or differing interpretations come from? Do they come from the specific identities of the judges, or does it come from the school that they were educated at, and their views of both the Constitution and our legal system?
Okay,
right?
And I just want to mention very quickly that there were also 3 women judges from the Court of Appeal who will now be elevated to the Federal Court. This means that for the first time, the Apex Court will have a total of 6 women judges. A happy day indeed.
Okay, before we forget, Cabinet, where the gender parity issue still has not been resolved.
Right. In fact, I believe it was part of the manifesto promise, wasn't it, to have 30% of women in cabinet. Now, we are still short of, so 30% means 8 out of 28 ministers, and we're still short of 3 women. We have 5 female ministers in cabinet, so it's up to Pakatan Harapan to ensure that they add more women into decision-making positions in cabinet.
And never too late.
Never too late. All right, let's move on to the very last order of business for this session of Dewan Rakyat, which was to refer BN's Pasir Salat MP Tajuddin Abdul Rahman to the Rights and Privileges Committee. So this was over his remarks on Tuesday, which allegedly assaulted the Hindu community. What happened was, during question time, Tajuddin was addressing Jelutong MP RSN Raya, and Tajuddin had asked if the Hindu holy ash on Raya's forehead was of Chin Peng's. Now, this saw tempers fly in Parliament.
Yeah, I watched the exchange, Melissa, and I must say that I think the Pasir Salat MP's demeanour suggested he thought he was being very funny and witty. I watching it, and I don't know what his intent in his mind was, but I doubt he intended to insult the Hindu community as a whole. It seemed to be an insult directed at a fellow parliamentarian, which in itself...
But still...
Bad enough. So,
yes.
I mean, collateral damage, he's now being accused of insulting an entire community, a whole religious community, when in fact maybe his intentions were just to insult a fellow parliamentarian. The question is, why do we even need this? And what is it that Pasir Salat MP, Tajuddin, thinks he's doing? I mean, what to impulse in him, produce this insult? Or joke, as he might have thought it was.
We were just talking, Sharaad, about missing MPs, MP absenteeism, right, in Parliament. What happens when this is the opposite? You're present, but you're speaking nonsense, I mean, is this any better than being absent?
Yeah, so, okay, one of the things, and I remember this having a couple of years ago when there were attempts to televise parliamentary proceedings, and there were attempts to do it online, and so on and so forth. And the idea was then that by having them confront the nation, or having potentially the nation as their audience, they would be at their best behavior. It would improve the quality of discussion. They would bring evidence and rational thinking.
Wow, that's
all
a high
these
standard.
things would happen because they were going to be doing this not to just, 221 other parliamentarians, but they were doing it to the entire nation. And clearly, that has not come to pass.
For me, I'm wondering whether the live telecasts of parliamentary hearings would then be translated into, upping the ante on the drama, turning the volume up, because you're playing to the peanut gallery now, you're playing to a wider audience. Of course, you want to make it a little bit more sensational. Is that what you think happened?
Yeah, well, there is that, and, I would shake my shoulders like you did just now.
Shimmy.
Make the point. Yeah, shimmy a little. But precisely, because television and the media has become entertainment, and politics is, no doubt, has that dimension of entertainment as well. And so Tajuddin, would have been thinking this was funny, he would have people laughing, and, the kind of low humor that you see in popular culture, they're expressed in Parliament as well. It's not like deep wit of any sort, certainly not, of any kind of intellectual merit, but it's sort of the kind of commonplace insults. And you're right. So then the question is, what happens next? We've democratized the viewing of Parliament. Is this our fate?
Well, today was the last day of the Dewan Rakyat sitting for this session, and the House has adjourned until March next year. But it was also the last day for MPs to declare their assets to the Dewan Rakyat Speaker. Deadline was at 5 p.m. today, and at 5 p.m, only 160 out of the 222 MPs had done so. I think 84 opposition MPs, only 22 out of the 84 opposition MPs had declared their assets. So what happens to the rest?
Okay, so what we do know is that the Pakatan Harapan MPs and those aligned to them have in fact declared their assets. Now, this is important because that's, again, one of their promises, right? The promise is up the ante on transparency and accountability to make sure that, if you come into power, that you do not abuse your position and amass a lot of assets in the period for which you are now in power. Now, the question is, if the opposition also, as we got from speeches at the UMNO General Assembly today, they feel that they're going to come back, they're going to roar back to power what kind of values are they going to bring to the table? They seem to declare that they know that Malaysia's changed, that Malaysians want something more, we assume, but, well, you know, they don't want to demonstrate it by, you know, showing their assets.
Do you think that the public actually cares about asset declarations? I mean, will the public hold the MPs who have not declared yet accountable?
Well, that's a very good question, Melissa, and I'm not entirely sure that anybody has the answer. Clearly, some Malaysians do care. Some Malaysians perhaps think other things matter more, you know, identity politics, the demagoguery of the individual. But it's going to change, and it will change as, you know, more and more people become aware of what is really important. Do they want their government of the day stealing money from them?
All right.
It's as simple as that.
Simple
because
as that.
when the politicians steal money, it doesn't go to your pocket, it doesn't go to social services, it doesn't go to your fund for, you know, school children.
That's true. After this, we're going to be taking a look at prison reform. Is privatization the right way to go? Stay tuned to consider this.